All right, RAV4. They're the biggest selling SUVs on the planet. They've sold well over 10 million of them. This guy just bought a used one for 9 grand. This one was made in Japan. Look at that paint. It's still immaculate. As we go to the side, you can see, Jay, it was made in Japan, which is what you want. And it does have the more powerful V6 engine. And I like the ones with the old spare tire on the back myself. Gives you more space. It's got a little over 100,000 miles. The guy's buying it as a second car. When he comes and visits his son in Tennessee, he wanted to leave a car here. And really, you couldn't pick a better car than this to leave. You can let them sit for ages, then start them up, drive them around. I mean, his son's gonna drive it every once in a while. You can let these things sit, especially since it's a 2011. It doesn't have all the crazy electronic crap that modern cars have. It will not have the parasitic drain that a modern car has. Unfortunately, you buy a brand new car, you buy 2023, 2024, there's so much electronics on those things. They'll tell you where you are. They'll probably show you where the nearest toilet is if you need one, right? But that's always using a little bit of electricity. If you let a modern car sit for 3-4 months, guess what? It probably won't start when you go to start it. This thing, no. Just like my old Celica. It can sit there for 7 months. Turn that key, whoop, starts right up. Because it doesn't have the parasitic drain that a modern car has. To say that this is dinosaur technology, because it isn't. Take off the dumb beauty cover, throw it on the ground, and you can see it's coming apart. It's another reason you don't want it, right? That's insulation. Eventually it could short something out, so it's a good thing I tore it off. Took it off because there's mouse turds in there. Well, it runs fine, so it didn't damage anything yet. Hey, the bottom side still has the regular insulation, but the other stuff, the mice made a little home. Another reason not to have a beauty cover. It gives them a house to hide in, you know? Leave them off. Really? They're stupid. Now, the reason that's insulated, because it cuts down on noise a little. These engines don't make noise anyway, so who cares? We look here, what do we see? It's got ignition coils on the top, right? But it's got regular fuel injectors. Port 3 for each side of the engine. Bank 1 and bank 2. You got 6 cylinders, you got 6 fuel injectors of low pressure. This isn't GDI where you can have over 1,000 PSI. These things are 45, 50 PSI maybe. I've seen Toyotas with 400,000 miles. They still got the original injectors on them, and they're still running perfectly fine. For my money, I would rather, in the long term, have one like this than a brand new one, because I know how the brand new ones work. I got machines to work on them, but hey, when you gotta buy parts, and odds are you're never gonna find a mechanic like me to work on it. These days, there's such a lack of good mechanics out there. It's only getting worse as time goes on. That these modern cars, as they get more complicated, and the guys that work on them get less and less educated because it's seen as a bad job, you know what ends up happening. You take your car in, you pay a bunch of money, and it's not even fixed. You can do the stuff yourself. Air filter here. This baby has timing chain. It doesn't have a stupid rubber timing belt, right? Toyota got rid of those things quite some time ago, but for some bizarre reason, Honda's still making a bunch of vehicles, SUVs, trucks, that have V6 engines with rubber timing belts. They need to join the 21st century, but for some reason, Honda decided not to. Toyota did a long time ago. Nothing you gotta think about that. If you got an interference Honda V6, you gotta think, if that belt breaks, valves will bend, engine's toast, cost me thousands and thousands. Even if I can find someone you can fix it, this, all you gotta do is change the oil every 5,000 miles. That chain generally will last as long as the engine, and the engine's gonna last 300, 400, 500,000 miles. So, better design. Now the newer ones have timing chains too, but it's a much more complex system than these older ones are. Now this particular one is V6 only front wheel drive. I say only. What do you need? With that engine, all you need on this thing is, see where it snows, put snow tires on the front. You wouldn't even need to put them in the back. The back's just roll, right? Let's go inside, check it out. It's say it's an 11, so it's old. So what does it have? It's got a CD player, yeah? But it also has an MP3 player too. Not old enough that it's got a tape deck, you know? It's got AM, FM, and all that stuff too. You can always put in whatever you want, you know? You want to stick in the Android, stick in an Android. Cloth seats, and you can see they wear well. Look at the room in the back, the cup holders. Got a nice trunk space. Did it have a sunroof? Moonroof? No. Who needs one? They're stupid as far as I'm concerned. It's still got all kinds of electronics on it. You can see it's got some nice aux power. You can turn the traction control off if you want. Now it's off. Now it's on. It has a real automatic transmission, not one of those crappy CVTs. These Toyota transmissions and these RAV4s are relatively bulletproof. You can see it's got 100,357 miles. So let's get the giant scan tool out, see if he got ripped off or not. I don't think so, but you never know. And it just plugs into the OBD port here. And check it out, I like it. It's got a manual seat. None of this power crap that breaks. These last forever, easy to adjust, and they don't break. It already connected itself automatically. Toyota, standalone diagnosis, VIN number all by itself. Knows it's a RAV4, 2011, 2 GRFE, two-wheel drive without a smart key. Here we go. Full scan. While we're doing it, we'll look around a little. Armrest is still in good shape. Got a lot of space in it. Interior still in good shape. Okay, it's 100% done, and the only thing it has is one code for the ABS system: low or high supply voltage. We're gonna erase that because the battery's been replaced before he bought it. It might have sat a while and gone dead. You get a weak battery, you'll get those codes all the time. So to erase the codes, we gotta turn it off, then just turn it on with only the idiot lights on. And now we'll look at live data. Start her up, and like I said, it's got a new interstate battery. That's why it had that code. We'll start looking at some interesting data, see what it's doing. Battery voltage. He just took a long trip, so it's only 13.6, but that's because it's already fully charged from the long trip. The short-term fuel trim, 0, meaning it's running perfectly. It's not adding or subtracting fuel. It's close to perfection. 1 is perfect. That's 0.002 off, and that's perfect. Oh, now it's 002 off. Going between almost perfect and perfect. Look at some more data. Temperature, everything on it's normal. It's all black, all normal data. So let's take it for a spin. Here we go. No backup camera. Got to use the mirror because it's an old car. First thing you notice, it's a V6, so it idles like a dream. And being a RAV4, it's relatively high. It's not outrageously high, but you get a nice view, you feel safe, and you don't have to worry about going through shallow water and having a problem, or being stuck in the snow because it's relatively high, and with snow tires, it's going to go pretty good. Being a 2011, you know, it's an SUV, and it shows it in the handling. You know, it's a little rough handling. You got to kind of wrestle through the curves. It's not low to the ground. It's not a race car. It is an SUV to transport people around. And here we go as the cat crosses the road. Nice acceleration. We'll see what it's like on a little drag strip. Most of these are 4-bangers. They got plenty enough power, but this certainly is a lot zippier. You'll get a little bit worse gas mileage. And I mean, it's not horrible handling. You take the curve. He's got to wrestle a little. It is a boxy vehicle. I mean, come on now. It's not particularly aerodynamic. Now, we'll look behind us. There's no one behind us. Here we go to our little drag strip. And 1, 2, 3, go. Whoa! Hey, this baby lays rubber. This is one screaming RAV4. And for those who wonder, yes, I did turn the traction control off. That's why it burned rubber. So you want to pass somebody, we're going about 40, we'll step on the gas. You can pass people. This thing's got some zip to it. Shifts like a dream, even though it's got 100,000 miles on it. Plenty of acceleration. I gotta say, I am a cheapskate and I would buy one with a 4-cylinder engine, but this V6 is a heck of a lot more fun to drive. You can hear a little wind, but it's not particularly bad for a high-up vehicle. The wind noise is pretty minimal for a 13-year-old vehicle. We're taking a little faster than we're supposed to, and it's holding the road fine. And of course, the brakes are pretty much overpowered for this thing. They'll stop on a dime with no problem at all. No stop-start technology. It idles the whole time and it's smooth. It isn't turning itself on and off. That obnoxious start-stop technology does not exist in this car. It's really a nice all-round SUV. That's why they're the largest selling SUVs in the world. And just this year, Consumer Reports are whining about, oh, we don't advise the RAV4. Oh, it's boring, blah, 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 blah. Just like people say, Toyota Camrys are boring. I want one of those. Hey, these things can last forever. And if that's boring to you, I said it's exciting. I don't like wasting my money fixing cars, having to buy a car because my old one broke. I want one I can drive forever. I have all the technology like, oh, look, it's warning us the stop signs ahead. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have pictures. It doesn't have all that crap. Yeah, but it doesn't have expensive repair bills either. All you need to do is change the oil and filter every 5,000 miles, air filter, whatever. When the brakes finally wear out, put new brake pads on. These things are easy to work on, and you can get discount parts that'll work perfectly fine because they made millions of these, so there's a giant aftermarket supply of parts for these things. This 2011 is like the perfect car for this guy. He got it for $9,000. It's probably gonna last forever. You know how much money he's saving on insurance? Sure, a new car is gonna cost a ton more on top of it, but the insurance is gonna be even higher than that. You get cheap insurance on a car that might run forever. It's a Toyota. It happened to have been owned originally in Florida, so it's got no rust on it. Now it's in Tennessee. It's not gonna get much rust here either. So, hey, if you want something that could probably last even longer than a new one, in the long run, it might go 400,000 or 500,000 miles. Realize why these are the biggest selling SUVs in the world. Because they last, they give people what they want. And yeah, they're expensive brand new now. But there's always used cars out there. And the market right now is starting to drop on used cars because the repo men are taking over now. With 7% interest rates and the price of cars, so many people are giving up on their cars. There's now a whole bunch of used cars out there, so you might start looking now. 2004 Sequoia, and it was one made in Indiana. Originally they made forklifts. They started making the Tundras, big V8 engines. People in Indiana do a pretty good job making cars. I'd have to say, if you want to get a car and it's not made in Japan, well, Indiana's as good a place as any to get it made. That or in Canada. They seem to do the better jobs. Now, why do people buy these vehicles? Because they're humongous. They're four-wheel drive with a V8 engine that can run forever. Yes, they get horrible gas mileage, but anything that big will. That's just the way that it goes. It has 251,000. He's put 151,000 himself on it. He bought it used. Paid 14 grand back then. And if you would have had a crystal ball, no one would have thought that today a new one of these would be $90,000. Yes, indeed. That's why he's keeping this one. As we look inside, he's got some decent seat covers. Things do wear out over time. And of course, there's lots of room. The seats go back. The original wheels on it. Now, it's been a Maryland car, as you can see. Now, he wants me to check the undercarriage, which we're going to do a little bit later, see what kind of shape it's in. There's definitely superficial rust, but these things are pretty solid made. You can hear that's solid, but it's got superficial rust. Personally, something like this, well, it depends what the rest of it looks like, but I would probably have it all sandblasted down, primed, and then coated. But realize this was a Maryland car the whole time. If it had been a Massachusetts car, or a Michigan car, or wherever, with assaults on the road all the time, it probably would be beyond repair unless you wanted to do a frame-off restoration, because they will rot. Superficial rust like this, not that bad to do with. But he even found a guy locally that will rebuild these frames. This particular one, they don't have the kit for yet. They probably will at some point in time, but for a lot of the Tundras and stuff, you can get kits, and you get guys who are pretty good at what they're doing if you do have a rusted out frame, because these are actual frame vehicles. They're not unibody construction, which then you pretty much say goodbye car. This didn't look bad yet. We'll check out more later, but we'll go under the hood. Oh, we'll look under. Here's why people buy them, an I-Force 4.7 liter V8 engine, 200-something thousand miles, doesn't burn any oil. Now, it is an interference engine. He has had the timing belt and the water pump replaced. You don't want to have the timing belt break and destroy the engine, because really, all this mileage, it still doesn't burn oil. These engines have an immaculate lifespan, which is why I detest that Toyota took them out of their Tundras and put in the turbo, twin turbo V6, which they have had problems. I forecasted there's problems, and there was problems. Now, these don't really have problems. And as I've told people many times, it's all BS. Don't listen to this hype about EPA gas mileage. Got a customer in Tennessee. He bought the Tundra with the V6 twin turbo. Guess what? He gets worse gas mileage in that than he did in his old V8 because he pulls weight. A V6 engine is not made for pulling weight. You can get horsepower out of it, but turbos, ramming the air in, tranny having to shift up higher, you're going to get horrible gas mileage. So it's actually worse gas mileage than these. And these are gas hogs to begin with. You get a big heavy vehicle, you're pulling something, you're going to get bad gas mileage. Don't live in la-la land. There's no free lunch. You're always going to have to pay for having a heavy vehicle that can pull a lot of weight. AC still works. You can see just about everything on this, other than the battery that's Sears. It's pretty much still original equipment. These things are really well made. You can see from the front, as the saying goes, they don't make them like they used to. The new ones don't have these coolers on them. Toyota says they don't need them. Well, then why did they need them in the first place, right? They're going more for planned obsolescence. They learned from the Americans. You don't make something that goes a million miles. You won't sell that many of them, right? These transmissions are going to last a long time because they have extra coolers on them. They just don't put them on now because it's cheaper to make them that way. That's just the truth. They're just giving you a line of baloney. Oh, it weighs less with that cooler, you know. Hey, don't ever listen to them. Just follow the money. And the money means it costs money to put a transmission cooler in. And if you're pulling weight with a V8 engine, you're better off with an extra transmission cooler. So let's get on my big scan tool and see what's cooking inside the electronics. Here we go. Set up the Autel here. It's old, so we're going to do manual input. And personally, I like it because check out the four-wheel drive. Look, it's an actual shifter where you put it in. Four-wheel low, neutral, or four-wheel high. Not a bunch of computer crap. Something you pull with your hand that is not going to break. Even the ones with electric motors. The electric motors break. This is very simple. You shift it yourself. I was thinking you could see he had a nice Sony interface. He got rid of the original crazy CD player stuff and has modernized it. There's plenty of stuff for all these Toyotas to modernize them yourself. And we have Sequoia, North America. Oh, but it lets us do topology, so here we go. Now, normally you can't do the CAN topology on an old car like this. Shows how high-tech these things were, even back in 2004. Kind of slow because it's old. It's 44% done now. While we're waiting, we'll just look around. Big old sunroof. Like I said, tons of space. Nice stereo system, especially since he added the Sony stuff. A change holder. I didn't know people even had change anymore. Touch of the armrest. It's not just some center thing you got to lean on. It's got actual armrest. And while we're waiting, we'll start her up. Typical Toyota starts right up. All right, and the only codes we see are for the brake system. Oh, look at the trouble codes. See what they are. ABS control system fault and a stroke sensor. Fascinating stuff. When this code is memorized, there is no malfunction in the skid control ECU. Okay, so it's got a crazy communication code, but it says there's no fault in the system. His light never came on, and he never had any problems. Okay, this thing is what? It's 20 years old now. You really don't expect those systems to act perfectly, but he's had no problem skidding, no problem with the brakes locking up, so something like that. We'll memorize this, keep an eye on it for future considerations, but when it tells you it doesn't affect it, do you really care? And we'll start her up again. And now I'll go to the main data here, the ECM. Maybe old, but it's got a reasonable amount of data here. It's in closed loop like it should. Now the long-term fuel trim of 1 is adding a little bit of fuel, and the long-term fuel trim of 2 is adding a little bit less fuel. You're never going to have perfection in something this old. It's only off by like 0.5%, so it's not that big of a deal. I can feel a slight rolling in the idle. He doesn't care. It runs good enough. He could put some fuel injector cleaner. That might fix it. You could have a really, really tiny leak in the intake system. Just a little tiny vacuum leak somewhere. No big deal. Mass airflow sensor stable. As you can see, okay, the fuel trim, it's 99.15. 100's perfect. So it's off 0.85. No big deal. Misfires, you can see they're all zeros. 1 through 8. So let's take it for a spin. How's you, my dad? Good thing the AC's working. No backup camera, of course. It's an old car. A giant Sequoia, like a tree. Well, it's going to go over this bump rather easily. He did put Monroe quick struts on it. I'm not a big fan. They seem to wear out fast over time. He just did it, so it should ride pretty good over these bumps. And it is, because it's a big, heavy vehicle. Realize that. I'm just not a fan of those quick struts. They're cheaper made and they tend to wear out too fast. So, we get to a little realm here. It's a heavy vehicle. You do have to push on the brakes to stop it. It's not going to stop like a little light car, but here goes the big V8 engine. Makes a lot of noise. Shifts fine, and it takes off. Not a race car, but hey, Race cars weigh a lot less than this thing does. Still runs strong. Plenty of pickup. Doesn't burn oil. And it handles the curves good enough. Something that's this tall up in the air. The four-wheel drive system still works perfectly fine. Obviously does a lot of turning because he's got a spinner here. Hey, look, it works pretty good too, I gotta say. Hey, I ought to get myself one of these. As you can see, it's got a lot of miles on it. 252,000 and counting. See in here, and I can feel, it's still got a lot of life in it. Doesn't burn oil, shifts fine. Now he wanted me to check out the front end for rust and stuff, so put on the old parking brake, turn it off. You see rust, but that's relatively superficial. Any of the bare steel parts, if they do start to crack, you gotta replace them. And in the case of this, people will just replace the entire lower control arm assembly if they have a problem. The main problem with this is going to be the bushings will go out. And if the bushings finally wear out on these, heck, you just buy the whole control arm assembly with the bushings, bolt them off, bolt them on. Don't try fixing them, just replace the whole thing. But you can see, the cross member's still solid. Now, here's a big rust bucket here. Right, it's all rusted. Well, that's just a stupid pan cover. It's just a cover. The transfer case, everything bone dry, no leaks. When you look at the actual frame, you can see. Okay, solid. I would have that sandblasted and primed and then coated. I'd do the whole thing. And if the lower control arms eventually started to have some kind of problems with the bushings or they were getting pit holes in them, then I'd replace the lower control arms. That's the main thing that wears out. You notice the upper control arms are pretty clean because they're up in the air. This gets all the splash and crud. Usually doesn't make it up that high. A Sequoia, like the ancient Sequoias, is aging quite well. Yeah, they're gas hogs. It's just the way that it goes. The frame's still in good shape. Everything on this is replaceable. Let's say eventually the lower control arms do rust and break, or the bushings crack and they start rattling around. Since the new one's 90 grand, a few $100 for parts here and there doesn't sound all that bad, does it? Okay, the lady just bought this Highlander. Now it's got 155 on it. As we look in the door, made in Japan. This thing was made in Japan, and this is why I tell people, get the regular seats because these are leather seats, and see, she got a nice cover. You got it because they crack. Now, the reason people buy these is under the hood. Variable valve timing, V6, 3.3 liter engine, very dependable Toyota engine, hooked up to an automatic transmission that can basically last forever. The only real downside of this Highlander is that it says four-wheel drive, but it's really all-wheel drive. I mean, what's in the name? So this thing only gets 19 miles a gallon combined, 16 in a city, and you can get about 22 on a highway. Now, when you buy a new one, you gotta pay more because they cost more to make them. Used, sometimes it doesn't make all that much difference in the price of the vehicle, but they weigh more. They have more wheels driving, they have more friction, so they're gonna get worse gas mileage. Interestingly enough, her old 380,000 miles Mazda, that's really a Ford Escape, she gets better gas mileage than that. And they both have V6s, and they both are four-wheel drive. So, you don't get these things for gas mileage. You get them so they will last forever, which they often do. Now, the usual Toyota faded headlights, you can keep polishing them away, or you can do like I did with my wife's car and buy brand new ones. These things are $60 a pair. Now, the only downside of this is it's an older one. And as you can see, it's got a rubber timing belt. But she is in luck. Just a few miles ago, it had the timing belt changed. Now, a lot of people say, Toyotas, they hardly ever break. I'll just leave the old one on. But this is the 3.3 liter Toyota V6. One of the only engines they ever made that's an interference engine. Take my wife's 2001 ES 300 Lexus. It's a 3-liter engine. It's non-interference. If it breaks, I put another belt on. No harm done. If this baby breaks, pistons will hit the valves if you go more than 20 miles an hour, and then it's goodbye engine. It'll bend everything inside. So she was smart. She had that done, and she'll probably never have to think about it again. Now you can see she had struts put on, they wore out, and she had a power steering high side hose put on and valve cover gaskets. But she's lucky she has a guy who works on RVs who does honest work. So she spent $600 having all their work done. You know? And I thought, oh, Connecticut, boy, she's gonna get ripped off. But no, she's on Social Security. She lives in a more of a ruralish area, and this guy works on RVs. He works on cars too, and he did a really fair deal for her. So not only does she get the right vehicle, she's got the right mechanic to work on the thing at the same time. Let's look under here, see if this thing's rusting out. And lo and behold, it is not. because Toyota knows how to rust-proof their vehicles. And I haven't seen her Mazda, but being a rebadged Ford, I'm sure the Mazda, the fenders are all rotting away. She's shaking her head, yes. They would all be rotting away, but this isn't. So this is actually a very good vehicle for her to drive in Connecticut. It did have a leaking sunroof, which they're notorious for. My wife had a Toyota Cressida and it had a leaking sunroof, but rather than put this tape and plastic, what I did was I put silicone sealer bead on the inside, closed it. I hate sunroofs, they get old, they leak, so if you got a choice, don't get a sunroof because it's gonna leak, even on a Toyota. So let's start it up. It sounds like a Toyota engine with 150-something thousand miles. They can run basically forever. Now theoretically, the valves need to be adjusted, right? But nobody ever does because unlike the Honda that has little screws, the Toyota, to adjust them, you would have to measure them all, write it on a piece of paper, then you got to take it all apart, take the shims out, measure the shims, and buy shims that will add or subtract so much to make the right adjustment. It's a gigantic pain in the rear end, right? But it's a Toyota. They last forever, okay? My Celica is a 94, 250,000 miles. The valves have never been touched. It still runs perfectly fine. Now the AC still works fine, of course. It's a Toyota. She did have work done on the struts and stuff, but like I said, it is not a rust bucket. Now, this is because at some point in time, somebody replaced this, right? Well, this is plastic. You're gonna have to sand it all down or whatever, and have it painted correctly and clear coated, then it won't do that again. Or if you can find one that's already painted, it's just two bolts holding it out, you can pop it out, put another one on. Find a good one in the junkyard, you can just swap it out if you wanted. Well, plug in a scan tool, fire up the old Autel here, and we'll turn everything off, turn the fan off, have the key on. While it's reading stuff, you can see it's got 155,738 miles on it. Doing its thing, reading it. It already read the VIN number. Now we'll get ready to do a scan. It's thinking, and here we go. And of course, we're talking dinosaur. It's got a CD player and yes, a tape deck. For those of you who don't know what a tape deck is, they had these tapes that were magnetic tapes and people played music on them. But nobody really messes with tapes anymore. The problem is they degraded over time and they would wobble and get stuck, and then you'd grab them and the tape would hang out, you'd throw them out the window. So now we see there's nothing wrong, there's no code, so we'll go to the engine and we're gonna look at live data. So we'll go to engine and ECT. Now the power outage the other day and the VCI Connect probably ran out of power, so I'm gonna have to recharge that. So instead, go to my other Autel because that doesn't have a VCI connector. It's just got a regular plug, which often works better. We'll go to engine and ECT. Now here's all the live data. So we'll start whipping through it. This basically goes to show that sometimes simpler is better. Rather than having a complex power supply box, this has a cord and a plug. Oh, here we go. We're gonna go through everything on this thing. Now we'll look at the fuel trim, okay? Short-term fuel trim, 1.5, 0.74, same thing on fuel trim 1 and 2. Now the long-term fuel trim is 7.7%. That means that it's running a little bit lean long-term, but an old car, you would rather have one that's running a little bit lean because this thing uses enough fuel as it is. If we fix this and it got the long-term fuel trim to get lower so that it was running less lean, you get worse gas mileage. A lean engine burns less fuel. Got electronic throttle, all that stuff's good. Remember, this is color coded. If it's a different color, it's got a problem. Injector millisecond is good. The EVAP system's good. Transmission data's good. No backup camera, so we gotta look behind us. And it's a Highlander, so guess what? It's high up in the air. So we're gonna have no problem going over the big old bump here. All right, over the bump we go. Now these things are pretty heavy vehicles. That's one of the reasons they don't get such great gas mileage. So I'm predicting, even though it's old, the ride over these horrible Rhode Island roads shouldn't be too bad, and I'm right. It isn't really bad at all. Now, the only thing that doesn't work anymore is their tire pressure monitoring system. I'm sure that the tire pressure monitoring sensors are all gone. The batteries have worn out when they're this old, but she's got a pressure gauge, so she doesn't care. Now, there's a V6 engine. Nobody's coming. We'll give it some gas. Sounds good, shifts good. Now I could feel a slight bit of hesitation because, like I said, it's running a little bit lean. But believe you me, she's not happy with the gas mileage as it stands now. You make it run richer, it's going to get worse gas mileage. And as we drive around, it's old, but it's still a very comfortable driving experience in this thing, you know. Corner's fine. She got a bunch of junk in the back, so it's rattling around. That's not the car, that's just all the junk she's got in the back seat. I don't hear any bearing noises. So, what do I think of her deal? Well, her Mazda Tribute, also known as Ford Escape, she likes that it gets better gas mileage, but when they rust away, they rust away. She made a smart move getting this because it's not rusting, it runs fine. They get bad gas mileage when they're all-wheel drive. And she didn't watch my video on that until she bought it. I saw her eyeing my wife's Matrix, especially when I told her it gets 37 miles a gallon on the highway. She said, that's my size. Well, you can't find them. There's hardly any good ones out there. Now, she told me she probably drives about 20,000 miles a year. I guarantee you this thing will hold up. Where her wallet hold up buying the gasoline part. That's the only downside of these things. And of course, if you're going for a modern one, I mean, you can get a hybrid, and they do get quite a bit better gas mileage. They've only got a 4-cylinder engine and a hybrid battery pack. But just price one of those, and then you'll think, hey, maybe buy one of these for $7 grand isn't that bad of an idea after all. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.